On the edge of a Birmingham children's hospital, a wealthy father carries his paralyzed daughter through the cold morning air, his arms heavy with guilt and fragile hope. Just outside the sliding doors, a black boy sits quietly in his duct-tape boots, sketching quietly in a tattered notebook. He neither asks for money nor moves, but then, as they pass, he looks up and says 7 words that stop his father in his tracks. "I can help your daughter walk again." What sounds like nonsense from a child with nothing becomes the beginning of something extraordinary, built not on science or miracles, but on memory loss and the quiet, unwavering kindness of a boy who watched his mother heal the forgotten. When medicine fails and faith falters, a broken family finds healing through the most unlikely of hands. This is no story of magic. This is a story about the heart, about showing up over and over again. Watch until the end, because sometimes the smallest step can change not just a life, but an entire community. It was cold that morning in Pittsburgh. Not the kind of cold that called for snowplows or shut down schools, but the kind that settled deep into your hands, made your breath show, and reminded you that winter in this city didn't play around. The wind whipped down 12th Street like it was running late, cutting through coats and scarves and making people walk a little faster than they wanted to. Outside the children's hospital, folks came and went with purpose nurses on break parents, with coffee delivery guys wheeling crates of medical supplies. Most didn't speak, didn't look up. The world around that hospital was always moving, always rushing towards something no one really wanted to face. But not everyone moved. Near the main entrance to the right of the revolving doors, a boy sat alone on a piece of flattened cardboard. His back was pressed against the cold brick wall, legs tucked in arms, wrapped around a worn spiral notebook. His jacket was 2 sizes too big. The sleeves rolled awkwardly over small hands, and one of his boots was held together with a strip of gray duct tape stretched across the toe. He didn't ask for money. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He just sat and watched. People walked right past him like he was part of the sidewalk, like a shadow. He was always there on Saturdays. Most had seen him enough times to stop being curious. They figured he was waiting for someone inside. Maybe a sibling getting treatment, maybe a tired parent working a shift. Nobody really asked. Places like that hospital weren't built for asking questions like that. His name was Theodore Jenkins. He was 10 years old. And despite everything about his appearance, the cracked glasses hanging from his collar, the frayed edges of his sleeves, the silence that wrapped around him like another layer of clothing, there was something in his eyes that didn't quite fit the rest. He had the kind of stare you usually saw in old men who'd seen too much of the world, not hardened, not angry, just still and full of something quiet you couldn't name. He watched people like he was learning them, memorizing patterns, taking notes that no one would ever read. Across the street, in a black SUV parked by a faded fire hydrant, Pascal Marshall sat in the driver's seat, unmoving. His fingers tapped once against the steering wheel before falling still again. He was in his late 40s, tall, lean, with graying temples and a jawline that probably used to intimidate people. Today, though, his face looked tired. Not just tired in the way that came from too little sleep, but tired in the way that settled behind the eyes. His tie was loosened, his collar wrinkled, and there was a tremble in his hands he tried not to notice. In the back seat, buckled into a booster chair beneath a thick pink blanket, sat Edna Marshall. She was 6 years old. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple braid, and one soft curl had come loose and rested against her cheek. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. She wasn't talking. She hadn't really said much to anyone since the accident. Her eyes stared through the window at nothing in particular. If you looked closely, you'd notice something missing, not just the movement in her legs, but a light that used to live behind her eyes. It wasn't gone, just buried. Pascal looked back at her just for a moment, then opened his door and stepped out. The wind hit him in the face like a reminder, and he closed the door gently before walking around to Edna's side. He opened the back, unbuckled her, and carefully lifted her into his arms. She was light, too light, lighter than any 6-year-old should be. He hated how easy it was to carry her now. She didn't complain, didn't shift, just rested her head against his shoulder, like this was how life was now. As they walked toward the entrance of the hospital, Pascal didn't see the boy sitting on the cardboard. Most people didn't, but Theodore saw him. He saw the way Pascal's arms tightened slightly around the girl like she might break. He saw how Edna's eyes didn't look at the building in front of her, but up toward the sky, as if she wanted to be anywhere else. He watched the way Pascal walked, careful, practiced. Not clumsy, but not natural either, like a man who had learned a new rhythm for an old dance. Then Theodore stood up. He didn't step in the way, didn't raise his voice. He simply said, clear and calm, "Sir, I can help your daughter walk again." Pascal stopped mid-step, not because he thought it was a joke, not because he was confused. He stopped because of how the words were said. They weren't loud. They weren't desperate. The boy hadn't tried to get his attention, hadn't called out twice. He had just said it once like it was a fact, like telling someone the time. Pascal turned his head slowly, eyebrows pinched, unsure if he'd heard right. "What did you say?" Theodore tucked his notebook under one arm and stepped closer, his breath visible in the cold air. "I said I can help her walk again." Pascal stared at him. He didn't answer immediately. He looked the boy over, boots with duct tape sleeves rolled up too far, lips slightly chapped, and that same strange stillness in his face, the kind of stillness that didn't belong on a kid. "That's not funny," Pascal said flatly. "I wasn't joking," Theodore replied. His voice didn't shake. Pascal looked down at Edna. Her face hadn't changed. She hadn't reacted. She'd heard it, but she was used to strange things being said around her. Adults trying to say the right thing. Doctors talking like she wasn't in the room. He looked back at the boy. "You don't know her," he said sharply. "You don't know anything about her." "I don't have to," Theodore said. "I just know I can help." Pascal's jaw tightened. He shifted Edna slightly, adjusted her blanket. This was stupid. This was insulting. He should walk inside and forget this happened. And that's exactly what he did. He turned, walked through the revolving doors, and didn't look back. But the words stayed with him. They followed him down the hall. They echoed between the beeping monitors and the smell of antiseptic. They sat beside him in the waiting room while the physical therapist gave another speech filled with timelines and cautious optimism. And every time someone said, "This will take time," he heard, "I can help her walk again." He didn't believe the boy, but he couldn't ignore him either. And that was the beginning. Pascal didn't say a word on the elevator ride up. The doors closed with a soft chime, and he stared at the floor number lighting up one by one, his daughter's head resting against his shoulder. The hallway outside the pediatric neurology wing smelled faintly of disinfectant and latex gloves. As he stepped through, the familiar squeak of his shoes against the polished tiles echoed just enough to make everything feel a little too quiet. The routine hadn't changed. Nothing had. The nurses at the desk offered him polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. The specialist greeted him like someone reading from a script. Pascal nodded at all the right moments, said thank you when it was expected, but his mind wasn't fully there. Something about that boy outside wouldn't let go. The words had followed him like a whisper stuck behind his ear, soft, calm, and certain. "Sir, I can help your daughter walk again." He had heard it only once, but it felt like it was being played on a loop, somewhere inside his skull, louder than the noise of monitors, louder than the voice of the doctor, now explaining muscle responsiveness and neural delay. He sat through Edna's therapy session like he always did. The room was bright and warm, filled with cushioned mats, colorful posters of cartoon skeletons, and machines that hummed and beeped as therapists moved through their routines. Edna didn't say a word. She never did. She let them move her legs, press against her feet, stimulate her nerves. Her face stayed flat, unbothered, as if she were watching someone else's body being worked on. The therapist spoke kindly, encouraging her with gentle tones, trying to coax engagement from a child who had long since stopped responding to that kind of tone. "We're still seeing minimal response in the lower extremities," she said to Pascal, smiling softly, as if that would make the news easier to take. "No need to worry yet. It's all part of the process. We just have to give her time. Her brain and body are still figuring out how to talk to each other again." Pascal nodded because that's what he was supposed to do. He signed the clipboard, thanked the woman, lifted Edna back into his arms, and headed back out into the hallway. On the walk back to the car, Pascal's hands tightened slightly around Edna's blanket. She didn't look up. She hadn't looked at much of anything in weeks, and that felt harder to bear than the paralysis itself. It wasn't just her legs that had gone still. It was everything about her. Pascal had lived in that silence day after day, and every time someone said, "It takes time," he heard a little voice in the back of his mind asking, "How much time?" No one had an answer for that. The hospital had the right equipment. The doctors had the degrees. But no one could tell him when, if ever, his daughter would be able to walk or smile or speak the way she used to. He got Edna settled into the back seat, pulled the straps of her booster snug across her chest, and shut the door gently. The air inside the car felt thick, like it had been waiting for them to come back. Pascal climbed into the driver's seat and just sat there. He didn't start the engine. He didn't turn on the heat. He just stared through the windshield, gripping the steering wheel, lost in a growing pressure that had no name. The boy's face appeared in his memory, without effort, quiet, still, eyes too aware for a child his age. That one sentence, so simple, so absurd, kept replaying in Pascal's mind, cutting through all the medical jargon like it didn't belong to the same world. I can help her walk again. It didn't make any sense. A kid with duct tape on his boots, sitting on a cardboard box outside a hospital, claiming something that trained professionals couldn't promise with any certainty. And yet, the way he said it hadn't felt like a guess or a plea. It had felt like a statement. Not hopeful, not arrogant, just known. That's what stuck with Pascal, and no matter how hard he tried to shake it off, it wouldn't go away. He looked in the rearview mirror. Edna's eyes were closed now, her face relaxed but not asleep. She never really slept in the car anymore. She just rested in a way that didn't disturb anyone. Pascal stared at her, wondering if he had done something wrong, if maybe he had missed something earlier in the process. Guilt crept in like it always did, even when he knew it served no purpose. She had wanted to go to the park that day. Emmanuel had told her no. It was raining hard, but Edna had begged. Pascal had said they could wait, but Emmanuel gave in. They got in the car. The driver that hit them never stopped. Emmanuel died at the scene. Edna woke up days later without the use of her legs and with a father who had forgotten how to breathe, without feeling like something inside him was fractured. Now sitting in that car with the world muffled outside the windows, Pascal found himself wondering about that boy again. Who was he? Where did he come from? Why would he say something like that? And more importantly, why did he say it like he meant it? Pascal finally turned the key in the ignition. The SUV rumbled awake. He turned on the heater and leaned back for a moment, letting the warmth soak into his frozen fingertips. The traffic on 12th Street was thinning now, and the sidewalk where the boy had been sitting was empty. Pascal didn't know what he expected to see him still there, waiting like some kind of fixture, but he was gone. Maybe he had never really been there in the first place. Maybe Pascal's mind was just so desperate it had conjured something, a voice, a face, a line of hope in a sea of white coats and sterile answers. But as he drove away, a thought surfaced that made his grip on the steering wheel tighten. What if the kid wasn't desperate? What if he wasn't crazy? What if he was right? The question sat with Pascal the whole way home. Through the traffic lights, through the turns, through the silence of Edna's room as he tucked her in that night. He kissed her forehead, turned off the lamp, and walked to his office with every intention of diving into paperwork he didn't care about. Instead, he sat down at his desk, stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen, and opened nothing. The quiet in the room felt like it was listening, waiting. Pascal leaned back, rubbed his temples, and closed his eyes. He could still hear the boy's voice. Clear, calm. I can help her walk again. And for the first time since the accident, Pascal felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not trust, not certainty, just a pull. Not toward logic, not toward reason, but toward the possibility of being wrong. And maybe, just maybe, the cost of ignoring that voice would be worse than the risk of hearing it out. It took Pascal 3 full days to go back. Not because he didn't want to, but because the thought of it made him feel foolish. He kept telling himself it was nothing, just a weird moment, a random sentence from a kid who didn't know any better, but it stayed with him anyway. That voice, that strange, steady voice, kept pushing its way back into his thoughts when everything else went quiet. It played while he filled out insurance forms, while he reheated soup. Neither he nor Edna would finish while he stared blankly at emails from clients he didn't have the energy to respond to. He told himself it was stress. He told himself it was guilt. But none of that explained why he found himself circling the hospital block late Wednesday afternoon just to see if the kid was still there. The wind had picked up since the weekend. The sky was a sheet of dull gray, low and heavy. Pascal parked across the street like before motor running, hands resting on the wheel. He scanned the sidewalk near the entrance, the edges of the brick building, the side benches near the staff lot. The boy wasn't there. He wasn't sitting on his cardboard, wasn't drawing, wasn't anything. For a moment, Pascal felt relief, like maybe the whole thing had been a glitch in his brain, a fabrication from exhaustion. But then he spotted him. Theodore Jenkins was sitting on the short stone wall that bordered the hospital's main walkway. No cardboard this time, no notebook either, just a pair of cracked gloves and that same oversized coat zipped halfway with the hood up. He was hunched slightly forward, elbows on his knees, eyes moving, watching the people that passed, without ever really looking back at him. Pascal sat in his car another full minute before finally opening the door. As he crossed the street, he tried to walk like someone who wasn't doing something stupid. His steps were firm, but not rushed. His coat flapped open behind him, hands shoved deep into his pockets. When he stopped a few feet from the boy, Theodore looked up slowly like he'd already known he was coming. "You again," Pascal said more to himself than to the boy. Theodore didn't respond right away. He simply nodded, then waited. Pascal stood still, eyes narrowing slightly. "Why would you say something like that about my daughter? You think this is funny?" "No, sir," Theodore said, his voice quiet, but not small. "I wasn't trying to be funny." Pascal glanced around. People passed without noticing either of them. A nurse in scrubs nodded at Theodore like she recognized him. A janitor pushing a cart gave a small wave. They didn't stop, but they saw him. That unsettled Pascal more than he cared to admit. "You don't even know her," Pascal said, adjusting his stance, jaw tightening. "You don't know what she's been through, what I've been through." "I don't have to," Theodore said, his voice even. "I just know I can help." Pascal exhaled sharply, scoffing under his breath. "You're what, 10, and you're sitting outside a hospital like you've got the answer to something grown men with degrees can't figure out." Theodore's gaze didn't waver. He reached up and tugged at the edge of one glove, revealing fingers with faint ink stains. "My mama used to help people walk again. She was a physical therapist. She taught me things." Pascal squinted. "So you watched her stretch people's legs, and now you think you're a doctor?" "I watched her help a man walk after 5 years in a chair," Theodore replied, the first edge of emotion in his voice. "She didn't have machines or big words. She had patience. She said the body remembers even when the brain forgets." For a moment, Pascal didn't say anything. The wind pushed through again, colder this time. Theodore pulled his sleeve back down. Pascal looked at him hard, then back toward the hospital. "I'm not giving you money," he said. "I didn't ask for money." "Then what do you want?" Theodore took a small breath, shoulders straightening slightly. "1 hour, just to show you." Pascal hesitated. His fingers curled inside his coat pockets. 1,000 reasons not to do this ran through his head. Liability, waste of time, the look on his brother's face if he ever heard about this. But then he thought of Edna, silent still, and slipping further away from who she used to be. "Fine," he muttered. "You want to waste your time, meet me at Harrington Green, Sunday, noon. Don't be late." Theodore nodded once. "I'll be there." Pascal didn't look back as he walked away, but he knew the boy hadn't moved. Somehow he knew Theodore would still be sitting there, just watching, as if this were all part of a plan he never bothered to write down. Sunday came with a kind of stillness that didn't match the cold. The sun was out, but the air was sharp enough to bite through coats and gloves. Harrington Green wasn't a park most people paid attention to. There was a cracked basketball court on one side, 2 crooked swing sets near the back, and a wide patch of grass that struggled to pass as a soccer field. The benches were rusted, the drinking fountain hadn't worked in years, and the chain-link fence that lined the sidewalk had been bent inward by time or neglect. But Theodore Jenkins was there early, sitting on the bench closest to the big oak tree near the edge of the grass. He wasn't fidgeting, he wasn't pacing, just sitting still and waiting. His oversized jacket was zipped all the way, this time his red knit beanie pulled low over his ears. Beside him on the bench was a small gym bag and a folded towel. He looked up once at the clouds, blinked, then looked straight ahead. Waiting wasn't something that made him anxious. He seemed like someone who knew how to let time pass without chasing it. At 12 minutes past noon, Pascal's SUV pulled to a stop just outside the park's north entrance. He didn't get out right away. He sat for a few seconds, his hand on the gear shift, staring through the windshield as if trying to remind himself why he was there. In the back seat, Edna sat upright in her booster seat, wrapped in a thick blanket. Her face was blank, but her eyes weren't empty. She was watching him, not with hope or fear, just waiting. When Pascal opened the door and stepped out, the cold hit him instantly. He moved around to the back and gently lifted Edna from her seat, cradling her in both arms. Her legs tucked under the blanket didn't shift at all. She didn't speak, didn't look up. He carried her through the park entrance, past the empty swings along the concrete path that curved toward the oak tree. Theodore stood up as they approached. His face was calm, polite, not excited, just present. "Hi again," he said. Pascal nodded stiffly. "This better not be a waste of time." Edna raised one hand slightly and gave a small wave, but her eyes drifted off before they reached Theodore's face. Theodore's mouth tugged into a half smile. "Hi, Edna," he said. She didn't answer, didn't look back. Her fingers tightened slightly on the blanket. Pascal gestured toward the towel. "So what now, magic carpet ride?" Theodore didn't respond to the sarcasm. Instead, he bent down, unzipped the gym bag, and pulled out a pair of long socks, a tennis ball, a small jar of cocoa butter, and a microwaved cloth bundle that still gave off gentle warmth. He laid the towel flat on the grass and placed the warmed cloth in the center. "Can she sit on the edge of the bench?" he asked, glancing up at Pascal. Pascal hesitated, then lowered Edna slowly onto the bench, making sure she was balanced before stepping back. Her legs hung limp, barely brushing the towel below. Theodore knelt in front of her, careful and steady. He took the warm cloth and gently placed it across her thighs. "Too hot?" he asked. Edna blinked, but said nothing. "It's okay," Theodore said, his voice softer now. He waited a few seconds, then reached for the cocoa butter, rubbing a small amount onto his palms. As he moved closer to apply it to her knees, Edna shifted slightly, pulling back, her body tensing. "It's just to warm the muscles," he said gently, but her head turned away. Pascal took a step forward. "If she's not comfortable—" "It's okay," Theodore said again, this time not to Edna, but to Pascal. Then he looked at her. "I can stop if you want. I won't touch anything unless you say it's fine." Still no response. For a long moment, Theodore sat back on his heels, unsure. He looked up at Pascal, who crossed his arms and gave a half shake of the head. It was the look of a man ready to say, "I told you so." Theodore's fingers hovered over the edge of the towel, then slowly retracted. Instead of pushing forward, he shifted the warm cloth slightly and said, "You don't have to talk if you don't want, but I'll be here either way." And he pulled out the tennis ball and held it in one hand, rolling it slowly in his palm. "My mom used to say, bodies get quiet when hearts are tired. Not broken, just tired. She said people need time to remember they're still whole." Edna didn't look up, but her fingers loosened just a little. "She worked at a shelter." Theodore continued, his voice calm, steady. "Didn't get paid much. Sometimes nothing at all. She used to bring me after school. I'd do homework on the floor while she helped folks stretch their legs or move their arms again. A lot of them had been forgotten." Pascal frowned slightly. He glanced at Edna. Her head hadn't moved, but her breathing had slowed. She was listening. "My mom died last spring. It was just us. She got sick fast, real fast. One day she was fine. The next day she couldn't get out of bed." Theodore looked down at the tennis ball. "Sometimes I sit in places she used to go, just to feel close to her. I guess that's why I started coming to the hospital. She always said people heal better near sunlight, and strangers who notice." There was a pause, a long one. Then Edna spoke, barely. "My mom died too." Pascal stiffened. His eyes shot to her face, stunned to hear her voice. Theodore nodded slowly. "I know. I'm sorry." Edna didn't answer, but her chin dipped slightly. After a moment, she whispered, "The blanket gets hot fast." Theodore blinked. "Too hot." She shook her head. "No, it feels good." He nodded again. Carefully, he resumed rubbing the cocoa butter into her knees, slower this time. She didn't pull away. He worked gently, moving one leg at a time, rotating the joints in small arcs, stopping when her muscles tensed, then easing back. "You feel that?" he asked after a few minutes, tapping gently along her shin. "A little," she said. Pascal was frozen. His heart was in his throat. The way she sat, the way she answered it, was more than he had seen in weeks. Her shoulders weren't slumped anymore. Her head tilted slightly toward Theodore, as if gravity itself had changed. Theodore moved on to rolling the tennis ball under her feet. "You like cartoons?" he asked. "Kind of." "You got a favorite?" She paused. "One with the cat that talks." He smiled. "Tom and Jerry. Classic." She gave the faintest smile. The first real one. Pascal felt something shift in his chest. Not relief, not hope yet, but something close. Something that made him want to believe. After nearly an hour, Theodore sat back. That's enough for today. Muscles get overwhelmed if you ask too much too fast." Pascal nodded. He stepped forward, wrapped the blanket around Edna's legs again, but this time when he picked her up, she looked back over his shoulder. "See you next Sunday," she asked quietly. Theodore didn't smile. He just nodded. Same time. Pascal didn't say anything on the walk back to the car. He didn't need to. And for the first time in a long time, neither did Edna. Sunday returned with the kind of late winter chill that slipped in through collars and settled under the skin. The sky was pale, a washed-out gray, and the bare trees lining Harrington Green stood like sentinels watching over another day that felt just like the last. But something was different today. Not in the weather, not in the landscape. It was in the way Pascal parked closer to the curb, this time engine off, no hesitation, before opening his door. He didn't sit for long to gather himself like last week. He moved around to the back, opened the door, and looked at Edna. She was already unbuckling her blanket, her arms reaching slowly toward him. She didn't speak, but her eyes met his with quiet readiness. That alone was more than what he'd seen in weeks. Theodore was already there. Same spot, same bench, under the oak tree. But this time he had laid the towel out ahead of their arrival supplies, neatly arranged beside it. The ball, the cloth bundle, a folded band of elastic, and the same little jar of cocoa butter. When he saw them approaching, he stood, but didn't wave. His posture was open, his hands at his sides, waiting not as someone eager to impress, but as someone prepared to continue what had already begun. Pascal helped Edna onto the bench. She settled with more ease than before, her blanket set aside now. The cold made her cheeks flush slightly, and she blinked up at Theodore without prompting. He crouched down, gave her a small nod, and said, "You ready to keep going?" She answered, "I guess." It wasn't a cheerful yes, but it wasn't resistance either. For a child who had said nothing for weeks, the neutrality carried weight. Theodore began by placing the warm cloth over her thighs, again adjusting it so it wrapped just enough without slipping. Then he moved to her ankles, lifting one gently to rest her foot on a rolled-up sweatshirt. "We'll try something a little different today," he said. "No pressure, just movement. You tell me the second anything feels off." Edna gave a barely visible nod. Pascal stood farther back this time, but closer than last week. Arms no longer crossed, hands tucked into his coat pockets. He was watching, but the tension in his shoulders had softened. Theodore lifted her left foot and began rotating the ankle, slowly describing the motion as he did it. "This part here," he explained, pressing lightly at the curve of the heel, "sometimes goes quiet, but it remembers how to respond. If we talk to it right, it might start listening again." He switched feet. Same gentle motion, same even tone. Edna's fingers gripped the edge of the bench. Her face was still focused, but not strained. Theodore tapped lightly against the bottom of her foot and asked, "Feel anything there?" She shook her head. "Not really." "That's okay," he said, continuing. "Sometimes it's not about feeling. It's about letting your brain know this part of you still exists." After a few more minutes, he took out the tennis ball and rolled it slowly under the arch of her foot, then along the heel. He changed direction, applied more pressure just slightly. Then he paused, looked up. "You okay?" Edna took a second, then said, "It's warm." Pascal shifted slightly. He hadn't meant to step forward, but his body moved anyway. "Warm's good," Theodore replied. "Means the muscles are awake, even if they're not talking yet." He pulled out the elastic band and wrapped it gently around her lower legs, showing her how it worked. "This is just to give a little resistance. We'll go slow, not about pushing hard, just waking things up." He guided her knees outward in inward small motions, using the band to create tension. Edna winced once, not in pain, but surprise. "I felt that," she said. Her voice had risen half a tone, her eyebrows lifting. Pascal blinked. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Where Theodore asked, without excitement, just interest. "Here," she said, pointing to her right thigh. "Not pain, just something." "That's great," he said calmly. "Let's note that." They went on like that for another 20 minutes. Not fast, not dramatic, but something was undeniably different. Edna was more engaged. Her eyes tracked Theodore's movements. She asked 2 questions. One about the band. "Did your mom use this?" And one about the ball. "Why does it have tape on it?" Theodore answered both with a short chuckle. "The band, yeah. The ball, I dropped it in a storm drain once. Tape helped it dry out." She smiled at that. It wasn't big, but it stayed longer than before. Pascal crouched near the edge of the towel, now not saying anything, but close enough to hear every word. His face had changed. The furrow in his brow had eased, his jaw less tight. They ended the session quietly. Theodore removed the band, covered Edna's legs with the blanket again, and handed her a small packet of wipes. "To clean your hands," he said. "Stretching can make your palms sweat." As Pascal stood up to lift her, a voice behind them called out, "Excuse me!" They turned. A nurse in scrubs walking her dog across the sidewalk had paused near the edge of the park. She pointed gently. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare. Was that movement I saw?" Pascal glanced at Theodore, then at Edna, who was looking at the ground. He nodded once. "Yeah, a little." The nurse smiled. "That's something. I've seen her around the hospital. Never saw her move before." Theodore didn't respond, but Edna looked up, almost unsure. As the nurse walked on her dog trotting beside her, Pascal turned to Theodore. "Same time next week," Theodore nodded. "I'll be here." As they walked back to the car, Edna's head rested lightly against Pascal's shoulder, and though neither of them said a word, there was a quiet rhythm in their pace. A kind of sync they hadn't felt in months. Something had changed, something real, and it had started in the cold in a park no one cared about, with a boy no one expected. The week after the nurse saw her move, everything slowed down. There was no new breakthrough, no foot twitch, no pressure point response, just more of the same quiet repetition. At home, Edna tried to move her legs on her own for the first time since the accident. She waited until Pascal was downstairs washing dishes, then threw the blanket off, gritted her teeth, and stared at her feet like she could will them to obey. Nothing happened. She pressed her hands into the seat, rocked her hips slightly forward, and clenched every part of her body that still listened to her brain. But her legs didn't move. Not an inch. She slapped her thigh hard enough to sting, then tried again. Still nothing. No warmth. No tingle. She felt like stone from the waist down. When Pascal came upstairs and found her crying silently, fists clenched, his face went pale. He didn't say anything at first. He just knelt beside her and put his hand over hers, but she yanked it away. Sunday morning arrived darker than usual, though the sky was clear. Edna didn't speak a word at breakfast. Pascal watched her push cereal around with her spoon until the milk turned gray. When he asked if she still wanted to go to the park, she didn't answer. He made the decision himself, packed up, and buckled her into the car without a word between them. When they arrived at Harrington Green, Theodore was already there, same spot, same towel, laid out supplies arranged with care. He waved, but neither Pascal nor Edna waved back. Pascal looked tired, not the kind of tired that came from poor sleep, but the deeper, frustrated kind, the kind of tired that came from doing everything right and getting nothing in return. He lifted Edna from the car a little too quickly, and she let out a small gasp. He paused, adjusted, but didn't apologize. He set her down on the bench and stepped back. Theodore approached with his usual quiet presence. "Hi, Edna," he said, crouching like always. She didn't look at him. "You okay if we start?" Still nothing. Her jaw was set, her hands balled into fists on her lap. Pascal let out a long sigh. "She tried this week," he said, voice flat, hard, and nothing. Not a twitch, not a flicker. "She's angry. And honestly, so am I." Theodore glanced at Pascal, then looked back at Edna. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to. I'll be here either way." "I hate this," Edna said suddenly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cracked in the middle. "I hate this park. I hate this towel. I hate these stupid stretches." Theodore sat back slightly, not reacting. He stayed calm. "Okay." "I hate this chair," she added, slamming her palm into the armrest. "I hate my legs. I hate how everyone looks at me like I'm going to break." Pascal took a half step forward, but Theodore raised a hand, gently asking silently for a moment. "You think I don't get mad?" Theodore said softly. "You think I didn't cry when my mom couldn't buy medicine and I had to just sit there and watch her get worse?" Pascal looked away. "I didn't want to come here today," Edna whispered. "I didn't want to try anymore." "That's okay," Theodore said. "Being tired doesn't mean you're giving up. It just means you're human." She shook her head. "But what if I am giving up?" Theodore leaned in closer. "I haven't given up on you." Silence stretched between them. "I'm scared," Edna finally said. Her voice was almost inaudible. Theodore didn't blink. "Me too. Every day. But scared doesn't mean stop. It just means something matters." Pascal knelt beside them now, hands on his knees, heart thudding in his chest. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready," he said. Edna looked at both of them, then down at her legs. Her fingers flexed on her lap. "Can we just do the warm thing? Not the exercises. Just the warm cloth." "Of course," Theodore said. He placed the heated bundle on her thighs. She let out a shaky breath, not from pain, just from being still. They didn't speak again that session. No one forced anything. Theodore just sat beside her while the warmth seeped through the fabric, his presence steady, like he was anchoring her. When Pascal lifted her into the car, Edna rested her head against his shoulder like she used to before the accident. No words, no smiles, just that small gesture, and it was enough for that day. That night, Edna lay in bed long before sleep found her. The blanket was pulled up to her chin, her fingers curled tightly into its edges like they were holding her together. The room was quiet but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that echoed with everything you didn't say out loud. Her eyes stayed open in the darkness, fixed on the ceiling, unmoving. She hadn't cried since the park. Not when they got home, not when Pascal gently kissed her forehead and whispered goodnight. But her chest hurt not from sickness, but from something deeper, like her heart had been carrying too much weight for too long and finally started to feel the strain. She thought about that day again, the one she never stopped thinking about. The rain, the way the windshield fogged up faster than the wipers could keep up, the way she had begged to go to the park, even though her mother had said no. She remembered whining, pouting, even stomping her foot, yelling, "It's just rain, I want to go." Her mother had looked tired that day, like the whole world was sitting on her shoulders, but she had smiled anyway and said, "Okay, just a few minutes. You win, little one." The sound of tires screeching came back next, uninvited like it always did. Then the crash, the sudden stop, the spinning, and then nothing, just darkness. When she woke up in the hospital days later, the first thing she heard was the word paralyzed. The second thing she heard was that her mother was gone. Edna squeezed her eyes shut now, trying to push the memory away, but it pushed back harder. She could still feel her mother's arm flung across her in the front seat, shielding her, protecting her. Her mother had taken the worst of it, and Edna had survived. That fact never felt like luck. It felt like punishment. She whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "It should have been me." And then the dream came. She was in the park again, but it was brighter, softer. The air was warm, the grass green, and the light came from everywhere without a clear source. She wasn't in her wheelchair. She was sitting on the ground, legs outstretched in front of her barefoot. Her toes twitched, and she stared at them like they belonged to someone else. Then she looked up. Emmanuel was standing there, a few feet away, looking just like she had that morning. Same coat, same hair, same warm eyes. There was no glow, no wings, no thunder. Just her mom exactly how she remembered. Real. "Hi, baby," Emmanuel said, kneeling beside her. Edna's lip trembled. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," Emmanuel said softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from Edna's face. "But I needed to see you. I asked to go to the park." Edna said, tears rushing forward before she could stop them. "You didn't want to. You said no. And I made you. I made you get in that car." Her mother didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She pulled Edna into her arms and held her tight. "I chose to go because I love you," she said, voice steady. "I knew the rain was heavy. I knew it wasn't the best idea, but I saw how much it mattered to you. That's what mothers do. We give. We protect. And I don't regret it." Edna sobbed into her chest. "But you died. I'm still here. Why am I still here?" Emmanuel pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "Because I made sure of it. I put my body in front of yours. I took the worst of it so you could live. Because I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. That's not something you should ever feel guilty for. That's something you honor by living." Edna shook her head. "It hurts. Every day. I hate my legs. I hate this chair. I hate feeling like a ghost in my own life. I know it hurts," her mother said, voice cracking now too. "I've seen you carry that pain like it's yours alone. But it isn't. Your dad carries it too. Every time he looks at you, he sees the best part of me still here. He loves you more than life, and so do I. Even now." Edna hiccuped through her tears. "I wanted to fix it. I thought if I walked again, maybe I'd deserve to be here." Her mother cupped her cheek. "You don't have to earn the right to be alive, sweetheart. You already are enough. Your worth isn't in your legs. It's in your heart, your kindness, your fight, your love." Edna stared at her mother's face, trying to memorize every line. "I don't want you to go." "I'm not really going," Emmanuel said, pressing her forehead gently to Edna's. "I'll be with you in every step, every breath, every time the sun touches your skin. But now it's your turn to live, to move forward, even if I fall, especially then." The light in the park shifted. Emmanuel stood up slowly. You're stronger than you know. I gave you everything I had. Now you give the world everything you are." Edna tried to stand, tried to reach for her, but Emmanuel only smiled. "You don't need to chase me," she said. "I'll always be near." And then she was gone. Edna awoke with the morning sun barely starting to pour through the blinds. Her cheeks were damp, but her breathing was calm. Her hands were still clenched to the blanket, but now they loosened. She turned her head slowly toward the door. She didn't call out. She didn't wait. She pushed the blanket aside, sat up straighter than she had in weeks, and whispered, "I'm ready." When Pascal came to check on her a few minutes later, expecting another slow morning, he found her already dressed towel folded in her lap, tennis ball beside it. She was waiting. "I want to go early," she said. "I want to try again. For real this time." Pascal didn't answer right away. He just stepped into the room and knelt beside her. His eyes were glassy, his mouth open as if trying to say something that wouldn't come. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's go." They arrived at Harrington Green 10 minutes early that Sunday. The sun had just cleared the rooftops, casting long shadows over the dew-speckled grass. The air was cool but not biting, the kind that carried the promise of a warming day. Pascal parked the SUV under the same tree as always, but there was something different in the way he stepped out. He didn't linger at the door or sigh before moving to the back seat. He opened it quickly, and when Edna looked up at him, he saw it again, that same quiet determination he had seen the morning after her dream. Her towel was folded perfectly in her lap, her hand steady. She didn't need help unbuckling. She didn't wait to be lifted. She looked at her father and simply said, "Let's go." Theodore was already at the bench. He stood when he saw them, and for the first time Pascal noticed how tall the boy seemed, not in height, but in presence. His gym bag sat open beside the towel. Familiar items lined up like always: the ball, the band, the cloth, the jar. But today he also had a second mat folded next to him. When Edna rolled up, Theodore gave her a smile that held no surprise. "You look ready," he said. "I am," she replied. Pascal set her down gently, but this time Edna adjusted herself on the bench before he could step back. She repositioned the blanket over her knees and said, "Let's warm up first." Theodore nodded. "We'll do the same routine." Then something new. They started as always. The warm cloth, the gentle massage, the ball underfoot. But this time, every answer Edna gave was immediate. "Yes, I feel that." "More on the left. That's kind of tingly." Her voice had no hesitation. Pascal crouched closer than usual. He didn't say anything, but his eyes were fixed on every small movement, every twitch of her toes, every flex of her fingers. After 20 minutes, Theodore sat back and looked at Pascal. "Can you help me for a second?" Pascal blinked. "Sure. What do you need?" Theodore took the second mat and unrolled it directly in front of the bench. He set the resistance band aside and placed the ball gently back in the bag. Then he looked at Edna. "We're going to try standing." Pascal's breath caught. "Standing?" Edna looked up sharply. "Really? If you want to," Theodore said. "We'll support you. You don't have to lift all the way on your own. Just let your body feel gravity again. Let it remember." Pascal looked between them, unsure. "Is she ready?" "She's not afraid anymore," Theodore said. "That's what makes her ready." Together they moved into position. Pascal knelt behind his daughter, hands just under her arms. Theodore crouched in front, adjusting her feet gently, aligning her knees, steadying her ankles. "On 3, Theodore said. "Just shift weight forward. Let your knees lock naturally. You don't have to hold it. Just rise." "That's it." Edna nodded. Her breath was already quickening. Pascal could feel her shoulders tremble. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you." 1, Theodore said. Edna's fingers gripped Pascal's sleeves. 2. Her knees tensed. 3. She pushed. It wasn't clean. Her right foot slipped slightly. Her arms jerked, but her knees held. Her torso lifted. Slowly, inch by inch, Theodore steadied her hips. Pascal adjusted, then let his hands relax, not completely off, but not holding her up either. And then for a brief, staggering moment, she stood. Both of them froze. Pascal's hands hovered. Theodore's eyes widened. Edna blinked. Her lips parted slightly. "I'm up," she whispered. "I'm really up." "You're doing it," Pascal said, voice caught in his throat. "I'm standing," she said louder. "Dad, I'm standing." Her knees wobbled, and just as they started to buckle, Pascal stepped in, catching her under the arms. She didn't collapse. She sank slowly into his arms and buried her face in his shoulder. He held her there, gripping the back of her head, unable to stop the tears. "You did it," he said into her hair. "You really did it." Theodore sat back on the mat, not speaking, just watching. He smiled, not a wide grin but a quiet, complete expression. Edna lifted her head after a few seconds. Her cheeks were wet, but her eyes were shining. "We did it," she said. Pascal looked at Theodore and nodded once slowly like a man who'd finally seen something he had tried not to hope for. "Yes," he said. "We did." They sat on the grass for a long time after that, the three of them. No one said much. They didn't need to. The birds in the trees sang louder than usual. The sky was clearer, and on the mat beside the bench, the indentations of Edna's feet remained pressed softly into the fabric like proof that something impossible had just happened, and no one could take it back. News travels differently in neighborhoods like this. It doesn't need headlines or breaking alerts. It moves from nurse to receptionist, from a whisper outside a clinic to a coffee poured a little too full, while someone leans in and says, "You know the Marshall girl." She stood up. That was all it took. One sentence, 3 words. She stood up. It was the kind of phrase that doesn't feel real until you see it in someone's eyes. The nurse who first spotted Edna at Harrington Green told her sister who worked in patient services. A janitor from the hospital had already known about the quiet boy who sat by the door. A therapist heard it from a mother in the lobby who wasn't even sure if she was allowed to say it out loud. But she did. And from there, it bloomed. The next Sunday, there were 2 new families waiting near the bench before Theodore even arrived. One had a boy with cerebral palsy, maybe 10 years old, who used a walker but looked tired of being looked at. The other had a girl about Edna's age, still recovering from a stroke, her left side slower than her right. Both sets of parents stood close to their children, arms crossed, eyes hesitant but hopeful. When Theodore approached with his mat and bag, Edna right behind him now in her chair, they didn't rush him. They didn't even speak. They just waited. He nodded at them and unpacked as if this was expected, as if they belonged there. Pascal stood off to the side with his coffee, watching, no longer anxious, just observant. Edna gave a small wave to the other girl, who waved back with her good hand. Then she looked at Theodore. "You're not working with me today. You've graduated for the week," he said with a small smile. "Besides, they need it more. You get to be the helper now." Her eyes lit up. "Really?" He nodded. "Talk to her like I talk to you. Ask her what she likes. Make her laugh if you can." So Edna rolled over, placed her towel on the ground, and sat beside the girl. "Hi, I'm Edna. I hated this at first too." The girl giggled just barely. Her mother started crying quietly, not out of sadness, but because something about watching 2 children connect through shared hurt felt like healing in itself. Theodore worked with the boy, showing his mother how to rotate his hips gently, how to use a tennis ball under his arch, how to recognize tension versus fear. He didn't talk much. He demonstrated, nodded, adjusted their grip. Every so often, he looked back at Edna, who was now explaining the warmth of the rice pack and telling a joke about how her dad once spilled soup on a doctor. Pascal gave her a mock glare from a few feet away. "That's not how I remember it. You were flustered," Edna shot back. The kids laughed. The parents laughed. Even Theodore chuckled. By the following weekend, there were 5 families. A local pastor had brought folding chairs and told people to just listen and be respectful. A nearby diner sent over a tray of bagels with a note for the kid with the gift. No one needed to ask who that meant. Flyers started appearing around the neighborhood, free movement sessions, Sundays, noon, Harrington Green. There was no contact number, no names, just the location and the time. Theodore didn't print those. Someone else did, but he didn't stop them either. When a local reporter from the Birmingham Post showed up with a camera and notepad, Pascal pulled Theodore aside. "Are you okay with this?" The boy looked around at the kids stretching on towels at the mothers, pressing heat packs onto stiff legs at Edna, showing a toddler how to balance on her knees. Then he nodded. "As long as it's not about me, it's about them." The story ran on page 2 the following Sunday. 10-year-old with no training helps dozens heal in a city park. They didn't use his full name. He asked them not to, but people found out anyway. A local physical therapist emailed Pascal asking to observe. A nonprofit offered to donate equipment. A retired nurse dropped off a bag of resistance bands with a note. "You reminded me why I went into this field in the first place." But Theodore didn't change. He still laid his towel out the same way every Sunday, still wore the same jacket, though Pascal had offered to buy him a new one more than once. He still checked on Edna first before helping anyone else, and she, in turn, became his voice when he couldn't be everywhere at once. She helped explain, she helped translate, she helped calm the nervous and cheer the discouraged. And so, the park, once just a patch of grass and cracked pavement, became a place of motion, of hope. And at the center of it all was a boy with taped-up boots who had no home address, no certifications, and no reason to show up week after week except that he did. When someone asked Pascal why he kept bringing his daughter back even after she stood, even after she moved her toes and flexed her knees and laughed again, he said, "Because this isn't just about my daughter anymore. It's about what she helped start, what he helped start." One afternoon, a woman from the city's community health board came by. She watched from a bench for 20 minutes, then approached Theodore with a clipboard. "Are you interested in being trained? We could get you certified, mentored, paid." He looked up at her, then back at the kids, then at Edna, who gave him a thumbs up. "I'll think about it," he said, "because sometimes when something is real, you don't need it to be official right away. Sometimes all you need is a patch of grass, a towel, a quiet heart, and someone willing to try." And they kept trying. Every Sunday, rain or shine. Because healing doesn't follow a calendar. It follows people who show up. And Theodore Jenkins never stopped showing up. 9 Sundays. That's how long it had been since Theodore Jenkins first told a stranger he could help his daughter walk again. 9 weeks since a 10-year-old with taped-up boots and a tattered notebook sat outside a hospital and quietly changed the course of dozens of lives. It wasn't planned. There was no script, no curriculum, no list of outcomes. But it happened anyway. And on the 9th Sunday, you could feel the difference before you even saw it. The grass had been trimmed. The benches had been wiped down. The city hadn't officially endorsed anything, but someone had placed cones to block off a section of the park. Folding chairs lined up under a pop-up canopy. Someone brought a speaker, not for music, just for microphone announcements. But no one used it. The kids still came with blankets and stretch bands and water bottles. Parents still walked slowly beside them, holding hope like it was a second child. But the energy was new, now settled, rooted. This wasn't an experiment anymore. It was a routine. And routines, when built with love, turn into something close to sacred. That morning, Edna arrived early. She walked from the car with a cane now, just a few steps at a time, slow and deliberate, but they were hers. Pascal followed behind her, not hovering, not holding on, just near. Her backpack bounced gently with every step. She had packed it herself, towel resistance bands, snacks for the younger kids, a folded piece of paper where she wrote the name of each child she helped that month. Theodore was already by the oak tree, unfolding mats, stacking towels, checking the zip on his gym bag, like he always did. He looked up when Edna approached and gave her a single nod. She nodded back. Nothing more needed to be said between them. The kind of bond they had didn't rely on words anymore. By noon, over 20 families were in the park. Some sat in clusters, others formed quiet lines near the shade. A few had traveled from other towns after hearing whispers through local clinics. One family had driven over an hour just to meet the boy they'd read about in the back of a church bulletin. They didn't ask for guarantees. They didn't come looking for miracles. They came because something about what was happening here felt real. Pascal walked slowly toward the oak tree and took a seat beside Theodore, who was adjusting a heat pack. He didn't speak for a moment, just watched his daughter crouch next to a young girl who wouldn't make eye contact. Edna reached into her bag, handed the girl a soft toy she used to hold during her first sessions, and waited. The girl reached for it eventually, and just like that, the door opened. Pascal cleared his throat. "You ever think about why you started coming to that hospital?" Theodore didn't look up. "I remember the hallway smelled like bleach, the kind that burns your nose." Pascal nodded. "But why sit out there?" Theodore's voice was low. "It was where I saw her last." Pascal turned to him. "Your mom?" Theodore nodded. "After she died, I kept going back. Not because I thought she'd walk out, but because it felt like if I stayed close to where she gave people help, I could keep a piece of her alive." Pascal exhaled. "You did more than that, kid." Theodore finally looked at him. "I didn't do it alone." They sat like that for a while. Then Theodore reached into the bottom of his gym bag and pulled out a worn envelope. He handed it to Pascal. Inside was a folded intake form from the emergency room dated 3 years prior. At the bottom, scrawled in fading blue ink, was the name Emmanuel Marshall listed under emergency contact. Pascal stared at it. His eyes didn't blink for a long time. She helped my mom once, Theodore said. Didn't have to, just did. Pascal folded the paper carefully and handed it back, but Theodore shook his head. It's yours. Pascal's voice caught in his throat. She never told me. She didn't do it to be remembered, Theodore replied. She did it because someone needed help. That's all. Then Theodore added softer, now I never forgot her face. The way she smiled even when she was tired. The way she looked at my mom like she mattered. And when I saw Edna sitting there outside the hospital, I swear it felt like looking at her again. Not just a resemblance, a presence. And I knew I had to help. Not because I owed her, but because I recognized the kind of love she gave. Edna had that same light. I couldn't ignore it. Later that afternoon, after most families had started packing up, Edna approached Theodore with the folded flyer someone had handed her. They want to start a new program downtown, she said. Weekly sessions, indoors, real mats, equipment. Theodore raised an eyebrow. You going to run it? Edna laughed. I'm 12. He grinned. Old enough. She tapped the cane twice against the ground. Not without you. He didn't respond at first. Then he looked around the park, the kids, the families, the quiet joy of motion, and said, maybe. That night, as the sun dipped low and the last chair was folded, Theodore stayed behind. Pascal helped him load a box of supplies into the back of the SUV. Edna sat on the bench, notebook in her lap, legs swinging lightly. Same time next week, she asked. Theodore closed the trunk and looked at her. We'll see. But the next Sunday he was there. Same bench, same towel, same quiet focus. Because that's the thing about healing, it's not a finish line. It's a rhythm. And when one person decides to show up for another, even without promise or praise, that rhythm grows stronger until one day, what started as one child's quiet belief becomes a movement. And movements don't end. They keep going. As long as someone keeps showing up.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.